Lately, I've been reading about youth liberation, and I was recommended to try Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time for its youthful elements. I've been feeling bored with video games lately. Everything costs way too much money, and it's never fully finished on release. You end up having to spend even more money on DLC to get the full experience, or everything is just random gacha time and money sinks, which lately I don't seem to have much to spare. So I decided to give Ocarina of Time a shot. I joked that I should take notes and make a video on it, and, well, here we are. I discovered Ocarina of Time is this tragic story of youth liberation, the overcoming of adult oppression. Adult oppression takes on the form of hurtful words, denied access to money and space, and a complete disregard for the interests and freedom of children. Adult chauvinism, as it's known as. On the surface, Ocarina of Time appears to be a story of a young hero chosen, set off on an adventure to save the princess and the world itself. But as I continued to play and learn about youth liberation, I realized this game was way more than that. This was the story of a boy who had given up his childhood to save the world, and then be left to wander for all of eternity, alone. Ocarina of Time teaches us that we need to liberate and give youth autonomy now, before we too lose everything. For those of you who have not played, this video will contain spoilers for The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. I'll try my best not to spoil too much of the details, but just a warning. I'm also going to be talking about one of my new favorite novels, Momo, or The Grey Gentleman, or The Men in Grey, by Michael Ende. It's from 1973, and it could not be more relevant today. I highly recommend reading it, and I'll try not to spoil too much of it, but again, I have to talk about these things in some detail. Prior to the events of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, a mother escaping a brutal civil war manages to deliver her baby, Link, into the hands of a village of forever youthful children, the Kokiri. The game starts off with Link waking up in the Kokiri forest on the day he is finally given a fairy companion, Navi. He sets off to meet with the great Deku Tree, who tells Link he has been cursed and is not long for this world. After risking his own life to aid the great Deku Tree, Link is rewarded with the spiritual stone of the forest, and he is told to go to Hyrule Castle and find the princess. That's where Link and Zelda first meet, two children bound by destiny beyond their comprehension. Zelda warns Link of Ganondorf, the evil Gerudo king, who she believes is after the Triforce. Zelda tells Link he must get the other two spiritual stones so he can enter the Sacred Realm and claim the Triforce before Ganondorf, which he does, but Link is knocked unconscious as Ganondorf, the BBEG, the Prince of Darkness, the physical manifestation of adulthood, has slipped in behind and claimed the Triforce for himself. After giving up his friends, childhood, and home with Master Sword in hand, Link wakes up 7 years later in the Sacred Realm. Now, all of a sudden, everybody wants to give him the tools he needs, the respect he deserves, and now he's found himself old enough to use the Master Sword. He is given a new quest: rescue the 5 sages, his childhood friends, and seal Ganondorf in the Sacred Realm. Spoiler warning, he does manage to do that. And he is able to save the world from the chaos that it had become in the 7 years Link was gone. But his childhood friends, the sages, Link ends up losing the relationship he had with them. He also loses Navi, his only way back into the Kokiri forest. He loses his community. All of this loss for a world that couldn't help but endlessly mock him for being a child. It's really tragic, and he experiences near endless amounts of adult chauvinism, which is definitely the most difficult part of the tutorial portion of the game. There is so much Link is not allowed to do. So many areas are blocked off in the tutorial. Every single NPC has something to say about Link's age, always reminding Link of how much beneath them he is, despite the fact that he is the one that saves the entire world. The Kokiri are like this perfect representation of child and nature working together in complete harmony. Tree houses made of stumps, handmade bridges, small tunnels only children could fit through. It was Link's home. The children of the forest had complete autonomy, for there was no other. There are only Kokiri and fairies. That seems really rad to me, and I'm all for youth autonomous zones. I just also started to wonder what it would be like if children and older people, not oppressive adults, lived harmoniously. That's when I discovered Momo, maybe the greatest piece of youth liberation that I have ever read. It's the story of a girl escaped from an orphanage that is found in an old amphitheater by a community on the outskirts of town. At first, the townsfolk aren't really sure what to do with her. The idea of calling the police is tossed around, and Momo was quick to turn that offer down. The townsfolk realized she would just be put right back in the orphanage she escaped from. Instead, Momo proposes something wonderful. Allow her to continue living right in the amphitheater they found her in. The townsfolk agree, and all learn to love and care for her as she does them. Other children come and join her, spending their days and nights together, playing all kinds of imaginary games like Ship, where they all pretend to be different members of an expedition crew during a storm. It's a really cute scene that started because some of the children had started to become scared during the storm, and the others decided to make a game out of it to help calm the frightened children. Momo also makes two older best friends, Guido Guide and Beppo Street Cleaner, both named after their professions. To me, they represented sort of a ideal older person-child relationship. There is a mutual love, care, and respect. Guido and Beppo talk to Momo as if she's just another person. There is no other category between them. Guido and Beppo offer uncoercive guidance to Momo, advice and information on things in the world, just enough for Momo to make her own decisions. That uncoercive bit being the most vital. Giving children the option to make other choices than the one suggested is youth autonomy. It's admitting that children might know what's best for them. The story of Momo takes a dark turn when the men in gray appear and start introducing themselves as members of the Time Savings Bank. They start convincing the townsfolk that they are wasting their time and need to cut out as much unnecessary things as possible, including but not limited to stop talking with customers in between orders at the restaurant, only allow 15 minutes for haircuts, no more spending time with sick older members of society, and especially no more seeing Momo. Adult chauvinism strikes again as townsfolk are convinced that children are a matter for the government to deal with. Children need to be taught how to be members of society through orphanages and schools, not by the members of their communities. After all, the communities are far too busy now with work to possibly raise children themselves. Unfortunately, this would later include Guido and Beppo as well, the two Momo depended on most. The entire town would fall to the curse eventually, cutting off Momo's connection to community, love, and that uncoercive guidance, leaving her to aimlessly wander until she meets a tortoise named Cassiopeia, who can only talk via words on her shell. Cassiopeia reminded me of somebody else. She kind of gave me Navi vibes from Ocarina of Time, only instead of "Hey, listen!" Cassiopeia's most uttered phrase is "by choice." Like when Momo asked Cassiopeia why she was hanging around her. Cassiopeia and Navi both are non-human companions who help their respective protagonists by offering information and guidance in both metaphorical and literal sense. Navi and Cassiopeia are the only reasons Link and Momo are able to get access to the Kokiri Forest and Nowhere House, respectively. Navi does serve a bit of a bigger purpose for Link, however. Without Navi, Link is not seen as a full member of the Kokiri. Link had a home amongst them, of course, but he was not recognized fully by the other Kokiri until after Navi came to be. Having a fairy is very important to the Kokiri. Without it, they would never be able to find their way home, the magically protected, forever youth autonomous safe zone. It made me wonder, has there ever really been such a thing? It's hard to find examples where that much youth autonomy is given. The Ideal Communist City, a document written in 1968 by the architecture faculty of the University of Moscow, talks about housing in a way that is at least a step in the right direction. Children live on campus essentially. 2 dormitories, 12 children, 6 in each. 2 playrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a room for teachers and auxiliary space. A much more community-oriented system rather than the strict family system we are currently working with. But the document also makes me nervous because the state is still in control of the education, educators, and presumably roommates. Youth autonomy means giving children the right to decide who their educators are, where they're educated, and how long. Children are not only capable, but should be encouraged to make choices like these. Decisions that impact their everyday, that's practicing youth autonomy. My research led me to this undated document that listed 15 demands by the Youth Liberation Organization. They spell out themselves exactly what they are looking for with their education. We want the right to form our education according to our own needs. We believe compulsory education is a form of imprisonment and must be abolished immediately. Grades must end because they stimulate competition, divide us, and make us work for other people's ends. All discipline procedures must be decided democratically within the student community. No school staff should be hired or fired without the democratic consent of the students. Students must have the right to use school facilities to hold political and cultural meetings, assemblies, concerts, etc., whatever they wish. They know exactly what they need and demand nothing less. This is a very inspiring document with the most rad cover ever. I highly recommend checking it out in its entirety. Part of uncoercive guidance is allowing children to explore their own interests. Understanding that children will naturally want to learn. Giving that autonomy will only foster more learning. A lot of the appeal to college was finally being able to choose your own classes, even if you did end up still having to take classes that you would never use again. I'm looking at you, calculus. Being told I was going to have a choice was something I remember being so excited about. Giving the state as much power as the ideal communist city suggests terrifies me, to be honest. Children may be able to live outside the family unit, which I'm all about, but they have to be willing to learn from someone they don't know at times they don't have a say in, with advancement only available as you get older. There's still way too much adult chauvinism in the world being imagined in the ideal communist city. Momo gets to Nowhere House, where she meets the administrator of time, Master Secundus Minotasaura, Master Aura for short. He owned the Nowhere House. He tells Momo exactly what the men in gray are, what they are planning, and Master Aura allows her to see inside her own heart, see the massive amount of time she still had left. She is told the only way she can save her friends is essentially to sleep for a year. There's this really dark scene after the hibernation. All of Momo's child friends are gone. They have been placed in child depots where they are taken care of by the state. They are kept off the streets, out of businesses, and out of adults' ways. It's horrifying hearing the way adults talk about children after the time skip. They are blamed for traffic, road accidents, and crime, while also being the raw material of the future, who are being allowed to squander years of their precious time on childish tomfoolery. It's a blot on our civilization and a crime against future generations. I nearly cried when Momo met her friends on the street and tried to convince them to run away with her. "We tried and failed already. You shouldn't talk like that," were the answers she heard in response. These kids were monitoring each other, telling each other to be nice kids, or else. Adult chauvinism unfortunately manifests in children as well. Momo shows us this with that quote from the children friends. "We tried and failed already." The children of Momo are being forcibly molded into complacent adults. They are given no choices, their opinions do not matter, they might as well just accept that this is just how life is. This is adult chauvinism working exactly as intended. This is not a bug, but a feature, for Link experiences it as well. Both Link and Momo are able to overcome what other children could not to save their worlds. It's devastating seeing Momo beg the children to allow her to play their games. She's willing to live in the child depots in order to be with her friends. But the men in gray don't even allow that. They recognize that she is too great of a threat to them inside the child depots. Momo is left all alone, completely isolated from her once thriving community. She even wishes she had never learned any of the secrets from Master Aura. The isolation almost becomes too much when she is finally reunited with Cassiopeia, who brings her back to Master Aura. Heavy spoilers for the end, but Master Aura ends up freezing time for an hour and gives Momo an hour lily, allowing her to move while time is frozen. She has to use this time in the hour lily to cut off the time supply from the men in gray, so they will run out of time and perish. She is successful and the city is saved. Everyone is reunited and happy again, celebrating with Momo, their long-lost friend. Momo, Beppo, and Guido are the only ones aware of what happened, for they are the only ones who believe. It's a very inspiring story that I cannot recommend enough. But there's one major point that happens in both Ocarina of Time and Momo that I don't really gel with. The leap from child to adult, that moment that happens seemingly in the blink of an eye. It's only a year for Momo and a very long 7 for Link. That time skip that happens in Ocarina of Time and Momo are both vital to the story. Before the skip, they are not allowed to use the tools of their liberation. It's only after the fact that they are allowed to use the Hour Lily and Master Sword respectively. They are not allowed to free themselves until they wait for adulthood to happen. There are areas Link cannot access, tools he cannot use. There's even a cap on how much money Link can carry until he gets the adult wallet. All of the people talking down to Link have no way of knowing that he would later become the one who saves the entire world. But that is no excuse. Children deserve respect at all ages because they are people too, regardless of if they are the savior of Hyrule or not. To do otherwise is just adult chauvinism. Telling children their ideas are not worth listening to is adult chauvinism. Uncoercive guidance and youth autonomy are the Hour Lily and Master Sword, the tools to destroy adult chauvinism, Ganondorf, and the Men in Grey. But why do our heroes have to wait? Why do these stories demand these children go through a time skip before they are awarded the tools of their freedom? Fairy tales were once made to influence children, teach them how to be good. More precisely, it taught children of the late 17th century how to behave the way King Louis XIV, the church, and the rise of the industrial bourgeoisie wanted them to. According to the potential of liberating fairy tales for children, it wasn't until after World War II that fairy tales started to take on more of a socialist approach, which I would argue Momo is definitely a prime example of. Ocarina of Time is a bit more subtle. It's not as blatantly radical as Momo, but it still deserves credit. Ocarina of Time can be radical when it wants to be. Both of these works are lacking in complete youth autonomy, however. Link and Momo are still forced to wait before they can free themselves. Waiting for children to reach some sort of stage of adulthood maintains the hierarchy of adult and child. In other words, adult chauvinism. In Momo's case, that year that she had to wait wasn't too long. She was still able to save all of her friends and have her community back. But Ocarina of Time ends with the story of the world being saved at great expense to Link. His friends in the timeline of the future die, his memories of them are his alone, for they never meet in the original timeline, and Link's community is magically blocked off from him. This is a warning to all of us. If we wait too long to give children the tools they need to break their chains, there will be apocalyptic consequences. The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time masterfully uses the history of the fairy tale as a tool for adult chauvinism and shows us exactly what the consequences will be if we continue to withhold youth autonomy.